Okay, we are live with Jono Scott, Aurora Ideas. This is the first time we have done this. I'm really excited. Thank you, Jono. Jono has invited us into his house today for an interview for Aurora City Council. He's a candidate for Ward 3, and Marsha Berzans is term limited, and so this is going to be quite the battleground because usually when incumbents are term limited, there's little name recognition for either side. So Ward 3 is an amazing place. We've done a lot of canvassing, and I'm sure Jono has too. And the city council is very divided right now. We're pretty much cut down the center through party lines between Republican and Democrat. I think the only registered independent on the council right now is Angela Lawson. But there are many issues going on, and a lot of people don't realize how important the city council is. Things like camping bans, minimum wage, infrastructure. I could go on and on. But the point of this is for the people of Aurora to get to know Jono a little better, and we're just going to have a dialogue, and hopefully, this is what democracy looks like. So, Jono, I'd love to hear more about you and what you're all about. I'd like to hear you. You can talk about whatever you want, but one thing that I'd really like to hear when it comes to your background is over the course of your life, when did you face some real adversity that actually changed your life forever and changed your perspective for better or for worse? How did you deal with that, and how did it change you for better and for worse? But yeah, with that being said, the floor is all yours, Jono, and I'm really excited to learn more about you.
Thank you, Dolan. Obviously, my name is Jono Scott. I lived here in Ward 3 since the late 80s when my parents bought a fixer-upper and worked here and worked on the house. I met my wife in college in Wisconsin back in between 2000 and 2004, and we moved to the area, rented for 3 years, and then we bought this as a fixer-upper. It was a major issue, and it sat as a foreclosure for 8 months, and by the time it was 9 months, we've slowly taken a room a year, and now 14 years later, we live in this nice house with our family. Grew up in the area, like I said, I've lived here over 30 years, call Aurora home, Wards 3 home. I thoroughly love this area. Love the parks, love the recreation, love the community, love the diversity. And really what got me involved in this was I volunteered for the soccer programs, coaching the community soccer teams. I heard about the mayor had passed away in 2018, and sadly, short bout of cancer. And that really got me involved more so because I've always followed local politics. I've really enjoyed following it, but really started to get me involved on it. I got involved, to make a long story short, on the budget committee. Mm-hmm. I was appointed to that by Mayor Bob Laguerre in 2018, the summer of 2018. After kind of a spontaneous application to be mayor. I threw that in there as partially a joke to my wife.
Oh, I didn't know. So you ran for mayor as kind of
it was
not seriously, but
to make a long story short, a very long story short, I was returning soccer equipment to the city hall. I heard on the radio on the way in, you want to be mayor of Aurora, put your name in by 5 o'clock. I did that. I returned the soccer equipment, went over to the clerk's office and said, hey, what do I need to do? And came home and I told my wife, guess what I did today? And she said, what? I said, I applied to be mayor of Aurora. And we both got a very good laugh out of it. But then it got me much further than I expected. And Mayor Laguerre, obviously, I didn't stand a chance to be mayor. I had no qualifications, knowledge, experience. Mm-hmm. But in the sense, I also applied to fill the city council vacancy. Yeah, through that.
Oh, okay. Ward 3 City Council?
No, that was an at-large position to fill the end of the term that was vacated by Bob Laguerre in 2018 through the end of 2019. Okay. I was one of the finalists. Make a long story short, I was one of the 5 that was interviewed. by far the least qualified, by far the least knowledgeable. I shouldn't have been chosen, and I wasn't. And then in 2000, after that interview, Mayor Laguerre approached me and said, "Hey, would you like to, if you're going to learn the city, you need to, if you're interested in learning about the city, the best way to do it, one of the great things, and I would recommend you, anybody else that's interested, especially in Ward 3, to get involved in boards or commissions, because really grassroots involvement, and I think we agree that the government is supposed to be by the people, and we have in the involvement stage of things, we have boards and commissions in Aurora. And so you can apply for a board, you can apply for a commission. There's some that are appointments, others that are just vacancies that you apply for. So I was appointed to the budget committee, Citizens Advisory Budget Committee. And
so let me ask you about the budget committee.
Yeah.
What do you think has been the hottest topic of where the money should be allocated in the Citizens Budget Committee?
Yeah.
How long have you served? And
2018.
Okay.
I really enjoyed it. I loved it because it was a way to get involved in the community. By the end of 2018, I was appointed. There's 22 on the committee, so each city councilor, 10, plus the mayor, gets to appoint 2 people to the budget committee. So there's 22 on the committee, a max of 22. Then they choose 3 within the committee to be on the executive committee. So since in 2019, 2020, and again currently right now, I'm vice chair. I was an executive officer for 3 years, currently vice chair. Michael Westerberg is chair, I'm vice chair, and we have secretary Julie.
So do you sit in on the city council executive meetings? Okay.
It's an advisory committee.
Okay.
So we study the budget, and then we recommend to city council. In fact, in September, we present our report to the city, the city council, to the city council face to face.
Yeah.
We say, as citizens, here's areas of the budget that we think need to be addressed.
So do they make sure that that's nonpartisan? So like half Democrat, half Republican,
Well, it's
evenly split? Or?
No, it's appointed by the council.
council.
So currently, right now,
So is that what major? What was the hot topic? What have been some hot topics? Like, is it water? Is it housing? Is it
yeah, great question. Within the committee,
yeah.
I love the committee. I appreciate Michael Westerberg's leading of the committee because he does an excellent job. So what we do is within the committee, we decide, okay, what do we want to study for our report? And this last year, we came up with 4 main topics to study and to present. So we have subcommittees. And within the subcommittees, they come up with reports, and then we present them to council. So the 4 main issues we came up with this last year was transportation.
Nice. I love that.
Yeah, because currently since 2008, we've been operating at right around a $20 million shortfall for our roads and infrastructure. And
that's
really,
just for roads and infrastructure in Aurora.
Short.
20 million in Aurora for infrastructure alone.
Yes.
Okay.
And so that's just been kicked, and a joke, but it's serious. We can't just keep kicking that can down the road because it'll literally get stuck in a box.
So let me ask you about infrastructure then. Is your priority, I'm guessing, roads,
that's one of them. And that's
bridges, but also what about buses and the frequency of buses and the amount of routes? Should we increase the routes, increase the frequency? Or is that super expensive? Is that something? Because they say that actually the light rail is a lot more expensive than busing.
Well, in one thing I've learned through this whole process is the differentiation between county and city and RTD type stuff.
Yeah.
And so there's very little. There's some, but very little that the city can do as far as public transportation. I'm for public transportation. I think it's great. It's more about the actual infrastructure of the roads.
Meat and potatoes.
Yes.
Okay.
And then one thing I was surprised to learn, and knocking on doors, I'm sure you've had this too, is the reality of the county versus the city. A lot of people say, why did our property taxes go up? Why do you as a city keep raising those? That's more of a county thing.
Okay.
The property taxes, some goes to the city, municipality, but the majority goes to the school districts and the county level.
Okay.
Within the city, the majority of our general fund comes from sales tax, sales and use tax, those type of things.
Okay.
So you think property taxes, mainly schools and county, sales tax primarily goes to the city, municipalities, even though there's a slice of the pie that goes to both and overlaps.
Yeah. So you were saying transportation was one of the four. What were the other three?
We did a departmental review of the police department, the way the budget impacts that, and there's recommendations made with that. Then the other one is attainable and affordable housing.
Okay.
And the fourth one was an events center, venues and events. Here's the reality. I was part of, primarily mine was on the transportation subcommittee, and I played a very, very small role on the events and venues. And I've been on that subcommittee before in previous years. The reality is most people in Aurora don't have, when people come and visit, they have to go into other places to recreate, to enjoy, to be entertained. And so we're losing all of those tax dollars and also the jobs and infrastructure. And
so let me ask you about that. So this is a bipartisan issue, economic development.
Yes.
This is one of your big priorities for your platform. So economic development usually means it's a good thing, right? But it can hinder the community if we don't prioritize the local community and the locals. Corporate America can just come in and bulldoze, and the result is oftentimes gentrification, displacement. I know that you're a big believer in the free market, but how do we have smart growth so that I understand that Bicentennial Park in that area, everyone, Democrats and Republicans, want this to happen, right? We want to be a hub. We want to compete against Denver, be a destination, right, for recreation and entertainment and restaurants and all those. We want to be a hub. We want to be vibrant. But how do we do that intelligently so it benefits, it raises everyone? I mean, I don't think anyone really has the answer to that because
it's a multifaceted answer.
But I would love to hear you do a deep dive into that.
I think that also translates into affordable housing and attainable housing. It's an algorithm. When you really think about the multifaceted aspects of jobs and infrastructure and housing, you can't focus on only one of those without realizing that it affects the others as well. And so for me, especially not necessarily Bicentennial Park, but the town center, there's a master plan. I've met with several of the people that are running that. It's considered a TOD, which is a transit-oriented design. And so the reality is, when you look at the Aurora Mall, what used to be called the Aurora Mall is now Town Center at Aurora, is right next to the In-N-Out building. They're putting a hotel, but on the other side, they're wanting to put in a 4-story condos. And then within that other areas, you have that big open field across from the municipal center. There's a master plan for that, and they're constantly reaching out to the community for surveys. That's where I love what you're doing with Aurora Ideas, and we are on the same page, and that is the community actually needs to say, and the city saying, here, we want to hear, we want to hear, we want to hear. And then they present their plan, and no one's bothered to give the survey, and then all they do is complain about it. And I'm saying this is our chance to get involved and say, hey, here's what we need to do. I'm getting off topic. What I'm saying though is we have to have a mixed use. I think we have to have part of that algorithm where we understand infrastructure and transportation needs to be funded, but at the same time we have to provide we have to address the supply, the low supply of housing, because that will in time also impact the cost of housing and cost of living. Estimates, you have 10,000 people moving into the Aurora area, and you
every year.
Yes, every year, and you have 1,000 housing units available for them. High school economics says 9,000 housing units are needed, and 9,000 people can't afford to live here. And so that also addresses things like homelessness and all these other things. And so working together in a way where all of those things are addressed Transit-oriented design also impacts the infrastructure, because then people don't have to drive as much. They can use public transportation more.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. And so we have, I just met last week with a guy who's doing, I don't think he's doing a senior housing in that area. And he presented what they're doing. And a lot of times we think, hey, these developers are wicked evil men that want to just steal everybody's money.
Okay, so let me ask you about that.
Yeah.
So when it comes to affordable housing, no one has the answers for this, by the way, in my opinion. If they did, it would have been solved by now. But, you know, the Democrats like to say, well, we need to provide programs for assisted living. And the Republicans like to say, well, we need to give incentives for developers so that they can build affordable housing that works for everyone. But how do we go about building affordable housing that works for everyone? Do you think it should be a combination of government assistance programs along with incentives for developers? And if you think it is a combination of the two, or you may think it's more of one over the other, let's get wonky here. Let's get in the weeds. Give me a detailed analysis as to what you think the answer is for affordable housing.
That's a huge question with a lot of multifaceted.
There are no right or wrong answers, by the way. Yeah.
So my thinking is, one thing we have to address, back several years ago, we had the construction defect law. There's some elements of it that are good.
Okay, you were telling me about that before. Yeah.
And some of them have really negatively impacted our housing.
So that means that the developer gets hit with a fee every time there's a construction defect, and therefore it drives up the cost of building. Okay.
And so what has happened is that entry-level housing, the low-income housing that we need really bad, the developers have to build in the cost of being sued.
Okay.
Because it's not a matter of if, but when they're going to be sued. And so they're going to go bankrupt. It's not a matter of, okay, they're going to make $500 million instead of $1 billion. They're literally just going to go bankrupt because the margins are so short. So what they've done is they've stopped building affordable housing.
Okay.
They've stopped building those smaller units that we need right now, desperately need.
Okay.
And so we have, that is a major issue, is their supply is down. So what are they building? The houses that have a higher margin, because then but when they get sued, they still have a buffer where they can still make some profit. And so as a result, the vast majority of people that need low-income housing, it's not there. The supply is not there. Yeah. And so there's two ways to do it. I am not a big proponent of government housing.
Okay.
And here's why. I'm talking to people who are, I'll give you a case in point. Okay. I think I told you about my friend that just moved to North Carolina. Okay.
Yeah.
He lived in Denver, and Denver raised the property taxes to address affordable housing. And so what they did is they priced him and his wife were working full-time jobs. They're just scratching ends meat, making as much. So they raised, not only had their mortgage, but now they have their escrow on top of that. That's raised to address affordable housing. So they've made housing less affordable. And what happened is they sold their house because they could no longer afford it. They transferred lateral moves to North Carolina. And in the process of that, a rental property maintenance company bought their house.
Okay.
So what we're doing is in my opinion.
So that's the other thing I wanted to ask you. You're a big proponent of the free market. So companies like BlackRock, Vanguard, Zillow are coming in and buying up houses. And a lot of people would say, well, this needs to be regulated because these houses were meant to be for people. And a lot of people would argue that it's artificially propping up the real estate market and making houses unaffordable for families. So do you think that is a problem, that these corporations, Zillow, BlackRock, Vanguard, are coming in and buying up homes? Or do you think, let the free market play itself out? This is America. We live in a capitalistic society. I think, let's hear it.
Okay, I think if we had more supply, that would address them coming up and buying the premium properties. So in my mind,
So you're saying it's a supply issue?
I do.
So you think these corporations should have the freedom to freely purchase these houses?
I think
it's our responsibility to figure out how we implement the incentives for developers to create affordable housing.
For me, I don't like the idea of a property maintenance coming in and buying a house, and then renting it out. Because
so you don't like the idea of these corporations coming in and buying.
Yeah, because studies show, we know, it's common sense. When a person owns a house or owns a property, they're more invested into the community.
Oh yeah.
In the sense where they take care of their property, they take ownership.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, I'm not for that. But at the same time, I think how do we address that is there needs to be 10,000 housing units for 10,000 people to need to buy. So we put so many, it's a balance. There's been so much restriction on these developers, especially with the construction defect laws, that they don't want to build those. And so what's happening is these 1,000 homes are such a premium. It's an investment. And so the more, in my opinion, that government tries to do, it just makes the problem worse.
Okay.
Like pricing out the affordability of the house, raising property taxes to address affordable housing has made affordable housing unattainable.
Okay. All right. So let's make a pivot here to just recently, Allison Coombs proposed. Do you watch the city? Okay.
A
little bit.
I do and I don't. I follow it, but I don't watch, till 3 o'clock.
Yeah. So I don't know if you may or may not know about this. So
Monday nights is my
it's
parents,
the worst time.
My parents live 4 blocks down, and they say, hey, from 5:30 to 8:30 every week is date night. You can drop the kids off and enjoy a date, and so we take full advantage of that. And then I read about it. And
okay. So just recently, actually, it was at the last meeting, Councilmember Coombs proposed to abolish the Oil and Gas Committee and replace it with the Climate Action Committee, which would basically merge with the Oil and Gas Committee. But so you'd have a couple of representatives from the Oil and Gas Committee, but it would focus primarily on how do we transition to green technology and facing climate change. So this was totally partisan. So all the Republicans voted against it, all the Democrats voted for it. But the thing is that, she said, I'll change my mind. So we're going to change it so that we keep the Oil and Gas Committee, and we also have a Climate Action Committee. The Republicans voted against that. And by the way, I haven't seen, this is the first day we've had blue sky since I can remember. So what's your opinion on that? If you were on the city council today, would you have voted for keeping the Oil and Gas Committee the way it is, along with implementing a Climate Action Committee? Because the Republicans voted against that.
I will answer that in a minute, but I'll say this. One of the problems that we've seen with city council right now is it is hyper partisan. Okay, and we have these issues on the left and we have these issues on the right. We have all of these issues in the middle that need to be addressed, like economic development, transportation, infrastructure, crimes, a skyrocketing crime rate, homelessness. And yes, there are partisan elements to those things. Right. But I'm saying these are the things we need to find a consensus on and we need to address. And so
do you like the idea of a Climate Action Committee?
I am not against green energy.
Would you have voted for it? Maybe.
I haven't looked at it.
So you're a maybe on that.
I would be a maybe because I didn't read the ordinance. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, you don't know the detail.
I know 5%. I know 5% of what it was about.
Who knows?
So I'd like to study it. I'd like to read it. I'd like to say, okay, what's the issue here? I'd like to hear from this opinion. I'd like to hear from this opinion, and I'd like to say, okay, here's the best thing for our community. Okay. I'm not serving a party. I'm serving a community. Okay. And so I'm saying, okay, in our community, is this a federal, state level thing that's already been addressed? Or is this something that I'm trying to be loyal to a party about? Or what's the best thing for our specific community, specifically as Ward 3, for Ward 3? Because I've said this over and over again, but it's so true. And any politician will probably say this, but invested in this community, I believe it. I don't serve a party, I serve the people. And that's the way our government is supposed to be built.
Yeah, yeah. So the camping ban, this has been really hot topic. The
Mm-hmm.
camping ban was implemented, I believe, in Denver. Correct me if I'm wrong. So Mayor Kaufman, this is his
Well,
thing and
yeah.
his ordinance, and it hasn't passed. But how do we take care of that? So the problem is that in Aurora we have. Okay, we're back. Had a little bit of a technical difficulty. Jono, I appreciate you sticking with me here. So yeah, the camping ban, huge hot topic. It happened in Denver. You were saying that the voters decided to implement that. I did not know that. But in Aurora, Mayor Kaufman is trying to implement it through an ordinance, and it hasn't passed. But the reason it hasn't passed, in my opinion, is, I may be wrong, that we don't have any place to put them. So if you just keep moving them around, you're not going to get anywhere with it. So I would assume that we probably need some more shelter space. I know the Aurora City Council is thinking about building a shelter within the next 2 or 3 years. It's kind of too far down the line, but it's better than nothing. Anyway, what's your opinion on the camping ban? Do you agree with Mayor Kaufman on the camping ban? And if so, do you know any of the details of the camping?
No,
Okay.
I would have to read it
Yeah.
in detail. But the premise
So you're a maybe on that
Yeah.
overall?
Yeah.
Okay.
The premise of it, I do think, as canvassing the area, people are concerned about homelessness. And I just talked to a lady yesterday and her husband, and they were talking about how a guy stumbled down the street in front of them right out of a tent, and she almost hit them on the 225 off ramp, and she's like, I would have been in trouble for killing someone with my vehicle. And we could tell story after story after story. The community wants city council to do something about it. I think the mayor has tried to implement something, and the Supreme Court says you have to have a place for them to go.
Is this the state Supreme Court or the federal?
I wish I knew that.
Okay.
I wish I knew that answer. From what I understand is, if you displace someone, you have to give them an option of somewhere to go.
Okay.
That's a legitimate
Do you think
option.
we have that?
No, there are, in my opinion, it's not necessarily something that government should be completely in charge of. They should be involved in it.
So let me ask you this: do you think people should be allowed to sleep in their cars on public parking lots?
Well, let me finish my thought real quick. I love places like resource centers that give them Brian Arnold, Bridge House, those type of places, who give them the resources and place for them to learn and to find a place of comfort and solace and safety, to gain social interaction and a networking group, and give the resources, things like the catering services that he does. I love that.
So the problem is that we don't have a place for people to rest their head at night, because I don't think we have a shelter that's 24/7, and I think it's coming in 2 or 3 years. But in the meantime, would you be okay with letting people sleep in their cars in public parking lots? I think it would have to be. What they say is, so it's at the police officer's discretion. So the police officer can decide to just leave the person alone. Technically, it's not allowed, but it's to the police officer's discretion as to what they want to do if they see someone sleeping in their car. But overall, yes or no on allowing people to sleep in public parking lots? Do you like the fact that it should be the police officer's discretion?
Here's a case in point. As a father of 4, we go to the park right over here. We go to the park right over here. And there's someone that sleeps in their car at this park. If I have a choice, I'm going to go to this park. Because I have a 6-year-old daughter, I have a 9-year-old son, I have an 11-year-old son.
Yeah.
We were at the
sanitation, safety.
We were at the community picnic, and my son says, Dad, I'm talking to people and having a good time meeting people, interacting. He's Dad, and he's just like, come on, and he interrupts. I said, you gotta stop it. No, Dad, you gotta come see this. He finds a fixed blade knife with dried blood all over it at our community park. It's the same park that, I'm not saying it's the same person, but I'm just saying that's not something. I grew up playing in that park, and that's nothing we ever encountered. We found needles, and so I'm like, okay, how do we find that balance? As a Christian, showing compassion and care to the poor and needy, there has to be a safety net for people without having it become a foundation where we attract that kind of society.
Right.
You look at people like certain, I'm not going to call out places, but you have certain cities who provide so much for the homeless where it becomes a burden on the society, and it attracts people from across the country.
So you're saying is when you implement these policies where you're giving out handout rental assistance, whatever, welfare, people are going to be less motivated or less pressured to getting out, picking themselves up by the bootstraps and getting out and getting a job. You're saying it could turn into a lot of people taking advantage of it.
Right, and that's why I'm saying instead of it being my friend who moved just to North Carolina, and there being a raise in his property taxes, so the fact that his burden of his own housing and raising his own family becomes so great that he just has to leave the area, and that money's going towards affordable housing and homelessness. And I'm like, well, that's become that the balance, the pendulum has swung. My thought is government should, or the city budget, everybody thinks that the city budget has to be the same with the federal. Federal can spend as much as they want, to the fact where we can get into an economics discussion on federal deficit. City budget and state budget, by law, state law, cannot go in debt. We have to keep a balanced budget on the state and municipal level every year. And so the reality is, every time we talk about these new programs, we are literally paying for it. And so people that are already struggling with affordable housing, or to rent, or to stay in their homes, we're literally talking about, okay, we're going to build a skyscraper, or build a condo unit for the unhoused. Compassion-wise, that's a great idea. But reality-wise, where's that money coming from on a city level? It's coming from you and I.
Right.
And we're already struggling. I'm thinking, okay, where's the balance there? We have to figure out a way to do this. And my thought is,
the balance.
My thought is, that's where you enable charitable organizations, where the municipal levels can help and point people to this. People like Comida, Second Chance Centers, Bridge Houses, those type of things, where you have people donating to those, Daniel's Fund. You have all these different funds on the private level that are propping up these areas, and then on a city level you can help reinforce that. But we're not buying on a city level a skyscraper for, because that money has to come from somewhere. And so my idea is, I don't want to just throw them under the bus or throw them on the bus, but we do have to have a balance where it's not too big of a burden.
So what do you think of this? If this is not allowed currently in the city of Aurora, so if I want to buy my own land without a house on it, and I want to pitch a tent on that land, as long as I keep that land clean and I have a tent there, it's currently illegal, but do you think that would be okay with you? As long as it's clean, it's my property?
Yeah.
You'd be okay with that?
On private land, I think they should be able to. I've broken that law. So don't arrest me. Yeah. My kids pitch a tent in my backyard all the time.
Okay.
I'm like, is that illegal? Like, they want to go sleep in the backyard.
That's great.
I think.
That's what Colorado's all about, camping, right?
I know. Yeah. So, if it's a private property and they're taking good care of it within the code and ordinances, they could set up a tent.
What if
I think there has to be reason to it, where if that tent becomes trashy, there has to be code enforcement involved in that, where it's not blowing into the neighbor's yard, or it's becoming a health or safety issue. But I'm not against that.
So campaign finance, this is so before the last election, it was basically free for all, freedom to raise money however you wanted. It was the wild, wild west, which freedom is freedom. Not a lot of people think that's a good thing. But by the way, still, even with the Marcano-Johnston legislation passing, it's still, you're allowed to raise as unlimited amount of money, but it's more regulated. Now, Mayor Kaufman sued the city for passing, I believe, Marcano-Johnston legislation. I don't know the details. He said it was unconstitutional. Do you know the weeds, or do you support Mayor Kaufman in suing the city over new campaign finance legislation, Marcano-Johnston?
Yeah, the entire campaign finance, from my understanding of it, Mayor Kaufman is suing a small aspect of it.
Correct.
And
yes.
the idea of it is,
Do you know what those aspects
from
are?
my understanding, is there's restrictions as far as what current candidates or current city councilors and current city elected officials can do for the others. So, for instance, if Juan Marcano wanted to support a candidate that's running for office, he wouldn't be, there's severe restrictions on what he can do to help a friend or other person. And so what Mayor Kaufman, my understanding of it, and I could be corrected, my understanding of it is Mayor Kaufman saying, hey, I want to be able to support, or, I want to be able to go to these functions or to this community picnic that so-and-so's there, and to say, hey, would you consider voting for my friend? From my understanding of it, he's suing over this, not over this. My personal opinion, you ask any of our friends and neighbors, any of us in our community, we would all agree that there's too much money in politics in general, federal, state, local level.
What do you think of taxpayer money going toward fighting Mike Kaufman over this lawsuit? Don't you think that's a bad use of taxpayer money?
I do. I will say this, though. That is a provision within that they should have taken care of before they voted for it. And I think that was what he was saying. He was trying to point out before they even voted for it, saying this is a constitutional issue that we need to address, and we need to make this amendment before you pass it. And they said no. And he said, well, this is an issue. This is the only out I have. My thought is, when I first heard it, I was afraid that it was going to be bad, because what it ultimately does, once again, it's that balance thing, is rich old people, and I'm not even going to say what, I just say just in general, they could fund their own campaigns. Because what I was thinking, okay, let's talk Trump, let's talk Polis, okay, nonpartisan examples from both sides. Polis funded his own campaign. He basically bought the governorship. Trump, in many ways, did the same thing with the presidency. I don't like that. I think average Joe Schmoes should be able to say, the way our government's built is, our community says, hey, who can best represent us on the city level?
Do you think there should be campaign finance limits, or do you think?
Yeah, I do. Originally, when I first saw this, I said, okay, this is a problem, because it knocks out the if I can only raise $400 per person, which is my ward level thing, I said, I'm going to struggle to raise some money.
Yeah.
And so let's say any random, whatever party they are or whatever side, a rich person can say, hey, I want to buy this city council seat. I'm going to self-fund my money to buy this council seat. I thought that's why I had problems with it in the first place. But in reality, I've started to like this, because I have neighbors. I think the vast majority.
I'm sorry, I got confused. So you started to like the current legislation, Marcano, Johnston.
Yeah. In some aspects of it.
Yeah. Okay.
Not in general, but I like the idea that it does limit certain things. And so, for instance, if I think constitutionally people have. A business owner has every right to protect his interests. He doesn't have a right to influence and buy an election. I think the current setup, it limits them. So if I have someone that I don't know but wants to protect their business interests, give me a campaign contribution. And then I have a neighbor give me that same amount of money. And then I have another neighbor give me that same amount of money. Ultimately, whose interests am I going to serve on council? If I have in my church, okay, I had a lady come up to me and say, have you filed yet? And I said, yeah, I want to be your first contributor. And I'm like, no, I'm supposed to be helping you. You don't, I don't want your money. I refused it.
Okay.
And she said, no. And so I know that she's on Social Security. She's limited in her income, and she's given me a contribution. Then I have someone that I don't know. I say, give me another contribution. Yeah, I'm going to care about their contribution, but I'm also going to, the vast majority of my contributions are friends and family and others and neighbors that say, hey, we think you can best represent us on the community level. Here you go. Friends from college. I had a friend from college that I didn't even really get along with from out of state. I haven't talked to him in years.
So
I sent him an invitation. He said, Jono, I care about you.
So you think out-of-state funding should be allowed?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think not out of country.
Right.
And that's the current finance thing. So let's say I have a...
Oh, so even at the city council level, you're allowed to receive money from out of the country?
No.
Okay.
You're not allowed to. Yeah, you can't.
Or there are ways around... Technically, it's illegal, but there are ways around it.
I don't know of them.
Okay.
You can, like, for instance, I have a relative out of state. I think they should be able to help me. You know, there's nothing wrong with
someone...
that. You call it your Christmas card list.
Okay, well, let's... Because you're a minister, right? So I'd like... let's go into your forte. You probably know a lot about the Bible, obviously. Is there anything... I'd just say, preach. Preach. You're a preacher. Start preaching.
Okay.
Like educate us on the Bible a little bit. Whatever stories you like in the Bible, and this is your big opportunity.
I'll take a few minutes and I'll just summarize it.
Okay.
It has changed my life. It has given me the stability, the strength, the satisfaction in life. I live not for myself anymore. I live for the glory of God and the advancement of Jesus Christ. In that sense, I'm living for eternity, not for the here and now. So for me, everything is a bigger picture. So I want to do three things. I want to love like Jesus Christ did, the lowest of the low, and the highest of the high in society, and everybody in between. Love like him. I want to live like him. And I want to lead like him. He was a servant leader. He was not all about himself. In fact, one of my on my card before I was doing this is Mark 10:42 through 45, and it talks about how governmental leaders are in it for themselves, but then ultimately Jesus came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. So, long story short, my major issues, safety. My campaign slogan is "I'm serving today, I will be set for tomorrow."
Let's talk about safety.
Well, real quick.
Yeah.
Safety, economic development, transportation. You add into there things like attainable, affordable housing, homelessness. I think those are issues, but the underlying issue, and that's as a minister, as a pastor, if you were to ask me what's the number one issue in Aurora right now, I would say those are surface level issues that are very important. But the foundation of all of that is we live in a broken world. Broken by
Do you feel like we're more
lying.
broken than ever before?
No, we've always been broken.
So we've always been broken.
As a Christian in the Bible, it talks about Adam and Eve at the very beginning. God created a utopian society using a different religion's ideology, a perfect society. But Adam and Eve broke the system. And ever since then, sin and death were brought into the world. And so as we see greed, lying, jealousy, crime, murder, all these other things, petty crime, it's because we live in a broken world that's dominated by sin. So all of these other things that are going on right now are a symptom of the deeper level issue. And for me, as a Christian, I wouldn't, one of the great things about